My name is Tim Samaras.
In May 2013, Tim Samaras peered through his windshield at the largest tornado ever recorded bearing down on him near Reno, Oklahoma.
I'm Tim Samaras, and I'm a storm researcher.
Dan, we don't have time.
How close was too close?
And we have learned of 3 more lives lost. Tim Samaras, his son Paul, and their colleague Carl Young.
Minutes later, the most respected storm researcher in the world was dead, his vehicle thrown like a toy across an open field. But this was only one of several times experienced storm chasers pushed too close to nature's most violent storms and paid a deadly price. Storm chasing has always been a deadly game of calculated risks, where even decades of experience mean nothing if you guess wrong about a tornado's next move. The chasers in these stories were not reckless beginners. They were professionals, researchers, and veteran spotters who thought they understood the rules. But tornadoes do not follow rules, and when these storms changed course or exploded in size, the chasers found themselves trapped in situations where all their knowledge could not save them. Each case shows a different way that confidence and experience can crumble when nature decides to rewrite the script. First, the deadliest mistake in storm chasing history unfolded on May 31st, 2013, near Reno, Oklahoma. Tim Samaras had spent decades developing specialized probes to measure tornado conditions from the inside. His TwistX research team was legendary for their scientific approach and careful safety protocols. But on this day, they found themselves facing something no storm chaser had ever encountered before. The tornado began like many others, a classic supercell spinning up west of Oklahoma City. Samaras and his team, including his son Paul and longtime partner Carl Young, moved into position to deploy their instruments. What they could not see was that this tornado was about to break every rule they thought they knew about how these storms behave. Over the next hour, the tornado grew from a typical funnel into a monster 2.6 miles wide. Subvortices, smaller tornadoes spinning around the main circulation, extended the deadly winds far beyond what anyone could see through the rain. The tornado changed direction without warning, turning southeast instead of continuing northeast. Multiple chase teams found themselves directly in its path, with nowhere to run. If understanding how disasters unfold helps you see the warning signs that others missed, subscribe to Stormforge so you do not miss the next story. Now back to those final moments on a country road outside Reno. The Samaras team was attempting to escape when the tornado overtook them. Their vehicle was found mangled in a wheat field, thrown over 400 yards from the road. Tim, Paul, and Carl became the first professional storm researchers ever killed while actively chasing a tornado. Families watching the news that night, it felt like losing the safest people in the most dangerous job in the world. The failure was not in Tim's experience or his team's caution. The failure was in believing that any storm could be fully understood or predicted. The Reno tornado rewrote the physics textbooks, producing winds over 200 miles per hour. In a circulation so wide that escape routes vanished before anyone realized the danger. Even the most careful chasers could not account for a tornado that behaved unlike any tornado in recorded history. If this tragedy could claim the most respected names in storm research, it proved that no amount of expertise makes you safe when nature decides to break its own patterns. And if the most experienced chasers in the world could be caught off guard, the next case showed how quickly overconfidence could trap even veteran spotters in impossible situations. Next, in 2021, multiple storm chasers converged on a massive wedge tornado near Selden, Kansas, convinced they could maintain safe distances while documenting the storm. The tornado itself was textbook perfect, a classic Great Plains wedge spinning across open farmland with clear visibility for miles. But the chasers made a critical error that nearly cost them their lives. As the tornado approached, several chase teams found themselves on rural dirt roads that had turned to thick mud from earlier rains. What should have been simple escape routes became death traps as vehicles began sliding and getting stuck in the wet clay. Video footage shows chasers frantically trying to dig their cars out of the mud while a half-mile wide tornado bears down on them. Minutes later, the situation became desperate. Multiple vehicles were completely immobilized, their tires spinning uselessly in the deep mud. Some chasers abandoned their cars entirely and ran across the fields on foot, looking for any solid ground or shelter. Others managed to rock their vehicles back and forth just enough to gain traction and crawl toward paved roads. The tornado passed within a quarter mile of the trapped vehicles. Families back home watching the live streams saw their loved ones running through cornfields with a massive tornado clearly visible in the background. For parents watching on computer screens, those minutes felt like hours of pure helplessness. The failure here was not technical or meteorological, it was tactical. These chasers ignored the basic rule about always having paved escape routes.
Okay. Go, guys, go!
They let the excitement of a perfect tornado override their knowledge of road conditions. Rural mud becomes as deadly as any tornado when it traps you in the wrong place at the wrong time. Even experienced spotters can forget that sometimes the biggest danger is not the storm itself, but the ground beneath your wheels. But if muddy roads seemed like an obvious hazard to avoid, the next case showed how chasers could be blindsided by dangers hiding inside the storm itself. Then there was May 28, 2019, when storm chasers pursuing an EF4 tornado near Lawrence, Kansas, found themselves trapped inside a hail core that turned their vehicles into scrap metal. The tornado was tracking northeast toward the Kansas City metro, and multiple chase teams positioned themselves to document its approach. But in their focus on the tornado, they ignored warnings about the softball-sized hail accompanying the storm. The first chasers to enter the hail core reported stones larger than baseballs hammering their vehicles.
That just came inside of my car and broke.
Windshields exploded within seconds, sending glass into the passenger compartments. Some chasers tried to continue driving, while others pulled over and covered their heads as hail punched through roof panels and side windows. Video from inside the vehicles shows chasers crouched below dashboard level, while hailstones the size of softballs crash through sunroofs and rear windows. Several teams reported their vehicles were completely destroyed, with every piece of glass broken and body panels dented beyond repair. At least 2 chasers had to abandon their vehicles entirely and seek shelter in roadside ditches. The hail core lasted over 20 minutes. For the chasers trapped inside, it felt like being inside a demolition machine. Some described the sound as deafening, like standing next to a freight train while someone throws rocks at metal sheets. Others said the impacts were so violent they thought the roof would cave in completely. The failure was underestimating a hazard that veteran chasers knew well. These were not beginners who had never seen large hail before. They were experienced spotters who decided that getting tornado footage was worth driving through a hail core that weather radar clearly showed was producing giant stones. They ignored their own training about hail dangers because they did not want to miss the tornado. For storm chasers, the temptation to get closer often overrides the knowledge of what closer actually costs. Yet even those lessons seemed simple compared to what happened when chasers misjudged not the hazards around a tornado, but the tornado itself. In April 2017, storm chasers tracking multiple tornadoes near Canton, Texas, made a critical error that nearly proved fatal when they misread the speed and direction of a rain-wrapped EF3. The outbreak was typical for East Texas, with tornadoes embedded in heavy rain that made them nearly invisible until you were dangerously close. Several chase teams were following what they thought was a slow-moving tornado when the circulation suddenly accelerated and changed direction. The rain-wrapped nature of the storm made it impossible to see the actual tornado funnel, and chasers were navigating by radar signatures alone. Within minutes, teams that thought they were safely positioned found themselves directly in the tornado's path. One chase vehicle was caught in the outer circulation and lifted off the ground before crashing back down in a roadside ditch. The chasers inside reported being thrown around the interior as the vehicle tumbled and rolled. Another team had their car windows blown out by the intense pressure changes as the tornado passed directly overhead. Video footage shows vehicles being pushed sideways across roads by winds estimated at over 150 miles per hour.
Newly released surveillance video shows a confirmed tornado touchdown in the town of Loris in Horry County.
Emergency responders found multiple chase vehicles scattered across the area. Some flipped completely over and others wrapped around trees and fence posts. Remarkably, no chasers were killed, though several required hospitalization for injuries sustained when their vehicles were tossed by the tornado's circulation. Families watching the live streams saw their loved ones' vehicles disappear into rain curtains, then reappear minutes later as twisted metal. For parents and spouses following the chase online, those silent minutes felt like losing someone in real time. The failure was trusting technology over instinct. These chasers relied too heavily.
Yeah, folks,
it's right there. Got a tornado on the ground.
On radar data, and not enough on the visual cues that might have warned them the tornado was closer and stronger than their instruments suggested. In rain-wrapped situations, sometimes what you cannot see is more dangerous than what you can. But perhaps the most disturbing case involved chasers who made split-second decisions that put them directly in the path of winds that should have killed them. Finally, on March 5, 2022, storm chasers pursuing the EF4 tornado near Winterset, Iowa, made a series of last-minute navigation decisions that nearly cost them their lives when they drove directly into the tornado's rear flank downdraft. The tornado was unusual for early March, a violent storm spinning across Iowa farmland during what should have been the quiet season. As the tornado approached, 2 chase vehicles attempted to reposition for better viewing angles. Instead of following their planned route, they made a spontaneous decision to cut south on a county road.
Oh man, this is a strong tornado. Get through here.
That would give them a closer look at the tornado's structure. What they did not account for was the rear flank downdraft, the powerful downdraft winds that wrap around the tornado's circulation. Within minutes, both vehicles found themselves in straight-line winds exceeding 120 miles per hour. The first vehicle was nearly flipped completely over, saved only when the driver managed to steer into a roadside ditch where the car rolled, but remained upright. The second vehicle was pushed sideways across the pavement and came to rest against a fence line with its roof partially caved in. Video from inside the vehicles shows chasers being thrown against windows and doors as their cars tumble through the wind field. One chaser can be heard screaming that they cannot control the vehicle.
Keep going, keep going. Why is this guy stopping?
As it slides sideways down the road. Another describes feeling the car lift off the ground before slamming back down and rolling into the ditch. The tornado itself passed less than 200 yards from the crashed vehicles. For the minutes they spent trapped in the overturned cars, the chasers could see the EF4 circulation clearly through their shattered windows. Some described it as the most terrifying and surreal experience of their lives, watching a violent tornado from inside a destroyed vehicle while wondering if they would survive the next few seconds. The failure was making tactical decisions under pressure without fully considering the consequences. These were experienced chasers who knew about rear flank downdrafts and wind fields around tornadoes. But in the excitement of the moment, they abandoned their careful positioning and drove into an area they should have avoided. Sometimes the difference between life and death in storm chasing comes down to a single wrong turn, made in a moment of adrenaline and poor judgment. These 5 cases reveal the brutal truth about storm chasing that no amount of experience can change. Whether it is Tim Samaras facing an unprecedented tornado, veteran spotters trapped by muddy roads, or experienced chasers caught in hail cores and wind fields, the common thread is always the same. The storm does not care about your reputation, your equipment, or your years of experience. Nature operates by rules that change without notice, and confidence becomes a liability the moment you believe you have it figured out. Since these incidents, some safety protocols have improved. Better communication between chase teams, more sophisticated mobile radar, and increased awareness of convergence zones have made some situations safer. But the fundamental equation has not changed. Every storm is different. Every tornado writes its own rules, and the margin for error remains as thin as it ever was. The most unsettling part is not that these chasers made mistakes. It is that some of them did everything right and still found themselves fighting for their lives. When your phone lights up with a tornado warning, remember that even the experts who chase these storms for a living sometimes get it catastrophically wrong. If this left you thinking about how quickly expertise can crumble when nature changes the rules, there is another story about the thin line between preparation and disaster right here when you are ready.